Welcome to the Logistics Business Virtual Show. My name is Paul Hamblin. I'm editor of Logistics Business Magazine, and you've joined the latest in our series of expert panels in which we look at the salient and important areas of interest within the warehouse and logistics industry. And the theme of this panel is something that's perhaps not discussed as much as it should be, and it's warehouse safety and worker safety within the warehouse. And I'm joined by experts from around the world who have a real insight into this due to the products and solutions that they bring to the market. So it's not about them giving you death by PowerPoint and sales pitches. What it's about is just them talking about the subjects in hand and helping perhaps your decision making and financial decision making when you come to next look at this, as I say, always important area. So without further ado, in fact, with further ado, I've forgotten to say something, which is do please use the chat facility within the Zoom facility there to ask questions if you have of the panelists, and we'll endeavour to answer those for you, and they will indeed be here hopefully to answer those for you as well. So moving on, let me first ask everyone to introduce themselves, and let me start with you, Abby.
Super. Well, thank you very much for inviting me to attend today. I've got 20 years, about that, visual experience within the industry across warehouse and logistics, construction, and I work for Scafftag, which is a Brady company, and we look after everything visual. So whilst the obligation there is for companies to do test inspections, we help them with the compliance and leading that out into onto the shop floor and really highlighting that it's been done.
Thanks, Abby. And James?
Yes, I'm James Ryan. I'm with Sentry Protection Products. We're a US-based business, but we've been in business for 24 years, but we've actually been in the European market for 22 of those 24 years. Our business our company has created solutions for warehouse safety and creating products that will absorb impact when forklifts invariably run into things, which is kind of, a natural part of warehouses. So we have building column protectors, pallet rack protectors, and most recently, some other devices such as blind corner warning systems. That's what we do.
Thanks very much, James. And Kevin?
So I come from the other end of this spectrum. I am a 30-year career. I actually used to drive for 30 years and then set up a company that produced a pallet puller, which is used in most industries that in logistics. So my company is called SafePul Limited, and and my experience is based on being a driver for many years, and also now having produced a product for the extraction of pallets from vehicles.
Well, I want to give everybody the chance to talk in a bit more detail about the products and solutions that you provide. So let's start with you, Kevin. Tell us about SafePul in a bit more detail.
So SafePul came about because of what I do. One of the first engagements that I had as a career was to get pallets off my vehicle. My vehicle was a transit, Ford Transit, and other vehicles are available. And on that first occasion, I was loaded up with 3 or 4 pallets. And the first one was obviously easy for the forklift to reach. But then the second and the third one was like, well, what do I do now? And they told me, well, you just put a strap around it, mate. So I had to learn these things on day one. When are we
talking about here, Kevin? Is how long ago that this was?
Wow, this is probably about 20 odd years ago.
Very different attitudes then.
Absolutely. I mean, it was just a case of, like I say, how do I do this? Because, being a new courier, I'd done parcel deliveries before, but I hadn't done pallet deliveries. And it was when I, started doing pallet deliveries that I realized that you actually needed tools to do this job. And so I started to, when I got home, I thought, okay, this strap idea is a bit vague, it's a bit sort of not very safe. And so I came up with a an idea, a contraption that would make it a safer product to pull the pallet out of the van. So hence the SafePul came about. It took a while to get it up and running as a small company, but yeah, that's where.
When was that, Kevin? When did you get it out onto the market?
It actually got out into the market roughly about sort of 2012, okay. And then it was just an early concept. So I had a few prototypes made up, and I was out there using it on day one, and using it meaning, you know, I was working for a lot of printers, and printers always move pallets around, and yeah, I started using it straight away, and I thought, wow, this really works. I did a bit of research on what was out there. There wasn't much out there, especially in the UK. And so I thought maybe I need to put this into production, and I did straight away.
Now, how does it work, Kevin? What does it bring that the strap didn't do?
So it's based on the safety of the action. So the hook that hooks onto the pallet is just a basic elongated hook that reaches into the central stump of the pallet, which I thought was more important than pulling from the front of the pallet for better weight distribution. So I designed that and then put the strap around it, which was the strap that we use anyway. But we used to go back to the forklift and tie it onto the forklift truck and then walk backwards with it. So I thought, no, there's another way of doing this. There's a safety hook that you attach to the strap, then attach that to the hook, and you stand away from the vehicle and allow the forklift to pull it back to the reach of the forks. So it was a simple design, but it was just something that I'd never seen out there in all the years that I've been driving. And I thought, okay, this is it. It's time to do it.
And presumably your customers are mainly, as you discovered yourself, they're driving smaller vans, that kind of thing, right?
Wow. Well, this is the scary part, Paul, because it turns out that I sell to major companies, major distributors out there. My first sale was, well, I actually best not name people on air, but my first sale was to a major distributor, and I was quite shocked that they saw it straight away, and they said, yeah, we get this. We don't understand why there isn't anything out there on the market. And so, yeah, I went ahead with it.
Well, good to hear about. Okay, we'll come back in a minute if we may.
Yes.
Kevin. Let me move on. Let me move on to James. And of course, James, you listening to Kevin's story about a single product that started him off. That's a little bit similar to what happened with yourself 24 years ago, isn't it? But you have a few more products to tell us about.
Yeah, well, again, what they always say is necessity is the mother of all inventions. So ours actually came about because, and again, it wasn't me, Kevin. I give you, I congratulate you for coming up with good ideas, because that's it is the basis of all new businesses. Ours really came about because we worked in the construction supply business, and one of our customers was working, building a factory for a molding company. And, you know, in the middle of doing all this, this contractor would get calls all the time to say, look, you know, we have a building column that you put up in a building that we've done, and, you know, a forklift has run into it, it's damaged it, and now we have to replace that column. And, you know, and the contractor was, you know, thrilled that he got more work, but at the same time, in the middle of a construction season, that gets very distracting, and it's expensive to do and all. So they worked with the molding company that he was, you know, putting up the factory, and they came up with the idea of, you know, putting in an inexpensive plastic energy absorbing protector that just surrounds that column and allows a forklift to run into it without then damaging that column. So it's a simple idea, but, you know, simplest ideas are usually the ones that sell. So he came to us at our construction supplies company and said, you know, he didn't really have the reach to be able to go out and do that. So we ended up forming a company to take advantage of that. And then from there, you know, honestly, I was out talking to a customer one time and said, well, you know, looking around, you see, I have 2 or 3 building columns exposed. but look at all those pallet racks that the same problem exists. So we really looked at it and said, well, that's brilliant. We should really just take that same idea of an energy absorbing impact protector and size it right for pallet racks. So we did that, and in 2000 brought out the Rack Sentry product, which has taken off, and I think worldwide we've sold like between half and million products overseas. We've sold it in probably 40 countries, primarily in North America and Western Europe, but we get calls all over the world for these products because they're simple. They're simple to install. They work. People, as Kevin and Jude mentioned, people immediately looked at it and said, "I understand that." There's not a lot of installing or understanding. It's just I can see it. I understand what's going on, and that's been our theme ever since. Everything that we do, we put it past that hurdle of it. Can the end user understand what's going on here, and can they install it themselves? And that drives everything that we do. And we now have probably a dozen different types of products, but they do the same thing. Most of them are impact absorbing products. And then a few years, about almost 10 years ago, we added to that our blind corner warning system, which again was something that simple to install, simple to understand, but we do that system warns people because it has sensors that look around both sides of a 90-degree corner, and if both are sense somebody there, meaning there might be a collision in the middle, it sends a warning to both sides, which is again simple. You just it's magnet attached, battery driven, snap it on the thing, and it's done. So again, we believe in simplicity. We believe in something that adds to the safety for that warehouse, and if it meets those goals, then we want to bring it to market.
And generally, Jim, you like to come up with products that you think don't already exist, don't you? That in another form. And I know your ethos is to work very much on quality, isn't it? And not to make sure that durability and reliability are front and center. Is that right?
Yes. I mean, there's a lot of products that we've come across over the years that we look at saying, if it's already out there, we don't bring value to it by saying, unless there's something new that we could add to it that significantly changes it, we're not out there to be the 10th manufacturer of XYZ product. I mean, again, there's something we could add to that, but most likely it's going to be a price competitive, commodity driven item, and we really look at it saying we want to add value. We feel like the future's in bringing new. What did the GE used to say? Bring new products to life. That's what we try to do, to steal from their marketing there.
Thank you, Jim. And it's incredible that that we talked about the importance of the area of this sector. And Abby, tell us about what you do, because again, there's a whole new range of products there, aren't there?
And it's really funny, from the birth of both of your companies and ideas, it's very similar with Scafftag. And I'll start with a product that's not particularly pertinent in the warehouse market, but the idea is the same. So Scafftag started, funnily enough, with the name, with a tag for scaffolding. Everybody knew that it needed inspecting, it had to be recorded, what duty was it up for, and the people on the ground needed to know that information. So Scafftag was born with a tag for scaffolding. But then through accidents, unfortunately, and or legislation, and client-driven, which I think is the key, people then came going, right, okay, well, we don't need it for scaffolding. The next biggest seller and the most popular, I would say, is ladder tag. And that is because, obviously, facilities, warehouses, all facilities, even at home, people have a ladder, whether it be fixed, whether it's a kickstool, whether it's a ladder, whether it's a pole ladder, but everyone's got one. But then it's a case of, right, okay, well, what do we do with it? And people know that it comes under legislative law, and it goes, right, okay, well, you have to have a ladder register, you have to inspect it, but then how do you record that? How do you identify that the ladder that you've come across in the warehouse is actually one of yours and not one that a contractor's brought in and left? And even if all of those tick boxes are ticked, then it's like, well, is it in date? And it's because there's nothing on a ladder generally, they'll go, or even if there was a reference number on there, people then would go, oh, I've got a quick job to do, I'll just use this ladder. They don't stand there and go, right, I must speak to facilities and see if this ladder's in date. So if something, everything that we do is very visual. So everybody knows that all of this needs to go on in the background. I will say on ladders, though, we have got facilities for ladder registers and inspection guides as well, because not everybody is au fait with how to do it. But it's a case of, right, okay, if you've got something on a ladder or on a pallet truck or on a forklift that says it's in date, the person that was due to do the pre-use visual inspection has carried it out, great. Now, with forklifts and things like that, plant, we've got tags that say the pre-use checks have been done. The pre-use checks are noted on one side and the guys sign it on the side generally that faces out, because then if somebody comes to the warehouse that day, then go, well, we saw Tom offloading that siding vehicle this morning. So we assumed that he'd already done the inspection. So then through the day, people jump on and off and away it goes. And I can see Kevin nodding to say, I mean, it's absolutely right. And if you've got a book, that's great, it goes in the transport office. But again, people don't go and check. Has it been done today? I saw Tom on it this morning. We're all good to go. And it's only when a fault or an accident happens that then all of this comes to its own forum. So the ladder, was it inspected? That would generally have the PPM on it. So the person that does down to their risk assessment, whether it's a quarterly, a monthly, an annual inspection, that will have that date on it. So if someone comes up to it, they immediately go, it's in date. It's like your car having an MOT, great. You still check the oil, check the tyres, make sure there's not a massive crack across the windscreen. You do all of those things. If there is, even though it's in date, you whip the insert out, leaves the holder, which clearly leaves it in prohibition. If it was a quick repair that, I don't know, the light on the top wasn't working, somebody got a new bulb, fixed it, insert goes back in, does a new inspection, everyone's good to go. And it just carries all of that information to the asset, whether it be a ladder, a pallet truck, a forklift, racking. Everyone knows, right, okay, we've had the racking installed. What's the safe working load? When was it visually inspected? Because again, it can miss things. Whereas if you've got something on there, somebody's doing a walk round, yes, it's in date, no, it's not. Yes, you can use it, no, you can't. And depending on how it is introduced, if I take a ladder again, everyone knows what a ladder is. You've got your PPMs then, it's in date. If the insert then gets taken out because it's either out of date or not fit for service, the holder's left there that says, do not use this equipment. So under the company's duty of care, they've kind of covered all those boxes, but you still put some of the onus back on the individual that is using the equipment or on site. Because if a ladder's got a tag on it that says don't use, and someone goes, oh, it's only a quick job, it'll take 2 seconds, which is unfortunately generally when the accidents happen, you've got to have some fail safe. So the only way somebody can go, oh, I knew it was out of date, so I'll take the insert out, it leaves the holder that says don't use it. So then their only option is to take the holder off. But if the company's introduced it with a toolbox talk that says everything has to be tagged, numbered, and you need to do your pre-use checks, everything should have been done so that there is a record, a traceability, accountability. Sorry, that's the word that I was looking for. To the obligation. So everybody then has to kind of step up. The company has to step up to say that these PPMs are being carried out. Yes, Mr. Warehouseman, this is what's happened. And then they've got their own responsibility of doing the pre-use checks while they're using it, or pre-use.
I mean, what you've raised, all of you, with what you've talked about, despite the difference of the products you've talked about, is how these accidents always happen when people are in a rush, when they are just trying to do something quickly, trying to do the right thing, and your systems are in place to prevent them doing that almost. I know I've just been asking you to talk for a while there, Abby, but I'd like to come back to you first, because you raised, when we were speaking before, you raised this very important issue of safety culture in the warehouse and how it comes from the top down. I mean, I'd like everyone to talk about it, but can you just talk a bit about that, about your experience of how the management of the warehouse need to lead on this cultural issue?
I think it's across industry as well. It isn't just for warehouse and logistics. With everything, the culture is changing. Traditionally, it was always, oh, we've done it like this for years and that will never happen. Why do I need to do that? And if you're led in a culture like that, oh, we're just going to quickly fill in all these books because we've got the auditors coming in, we need to make sure that all the checks have been done and we need to say that we've done them, then that's all well and good when everything runs. But when you've got, oh, it's just a form, oh, it's just this, it's just that, it makes the people doing the work kind of go, oh, well, they don't care, why do I need to care? So it is a real cultural change that has to come from the top down. And I think, I don't really want to mention it, but when they changed the law and said, right, okay, ignorance isn't a form of defence. And I think that drove some of the cultural changes, because people then went, oh God, it's going to affect me. And I think when people see that it has got an impact, and it's, again, I think it has to come from the top as well, because if accidents happen under anybody's company, it has such a knock-on effect on the staff, on the working processes, clearly of the friends and family of the person that's involved in the accident. It's got such far-reaching ripples that people have to engage. But I mean, I was on the board for the London Health and Safety Group for a lot of years, and it was a big conversational market that's saying, right, okay, well, we know health and safety professionals will come in and go, right, okay, well, we know all these things need to be happening, but how do we get the bosses to engage? And a lot of it is by talking to them, by enthusiasm, and also by simplicity. Each one of us have said how simple the solution is that we've got. And I think that is the key. If something is too difficult, people kind of go, oh yeah, well, we'll do it another time. It's too much like hard work, or it's too much administration, whereas everything that we've got is a good solution. It's simple, people can see how it works, and it does work. And I think that in itself drives a cultural change.
It drives better culture, yeah. I mean, Kevin, anything to add? I wanted to very much get an opinion from James Ryan on this, but Kevin, anything to add to that from what we've heard?
Well, I think that is spot on, and again, my perspective can sometimes be from the smaller distribution companies, or smaller, anybody using a forklift truck that's got a warehouse. You'd sometimes wonder, how do we do things? How do we do a risk assessment? What is a risk assessment? What constitutes legally that I've done a risk assessment properly? And really, it's about just safety aspects, isn't it? When you're in the workplace, if everybody's got an idea of how safely things should be done, then that is, in essence, the beginnings of your risk assessment. So, it's just that normal working practice around the yard, around the warehouse area, that everybody's in tune with and understands and feels comfortable with, that then sets the tone for the rest of the workforce. And I think it's very important that we all get this right, because the slightest accident can cause issues. And as we all know, there's lots of insurance companies out there ready to pounce on these things. And so it's just nice to just have a workforce that understand each other, and that, and not blasé when it comes to safety, Yeah, I think it's a very important factor that's out there.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I wanted to come to you last, James, on this, because of course what we've heard about from Abby and Kevin is very much a UK and European perspective, and we've got a very different regulatory setup here.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your view about how North America and the rest of the globe approaches these issues in terms of safety culture?
Well, I think that, I mean, it's different in the U.S. approach, of course, to everything is not as much of regulatory, but there's still limitations, and unfortunately, in our society, at least in the U.S., it's driven by, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, lawsuits and legal action that's brought when something occurs, and we just hope it doesn't do that. I look at it fundamentally as, you've got a clash of two different things here. On the one hand, in every warehouse and every business, productivity is such an important issue. I mean, you've got to be able to get the job done, and the faster you get it done, the more productive you are, the better the company goes. But on the other hand, you've got safety, because the person needs to, the people you hire need to be able to go home at night in the same shape that they showed up at work. I mean, you don't want to be sending them home with broken arms or worse. And, and I think that the way that at least we approach business, and I think, and talking to Kevin and Abby of the same thing, is our challenge is to try to provide people so that they can kind of mix those two objectives. And if you've got an objective to be productive, then we need to try to provide tools so that you can be productive and at the same time be safer. And it's really interesting hearing, Abby's the Scafttags, and the fact of the productivity of having all that information where you need it, when you need it. Absolutely. Is so much better than, okay, that people are not going to go back and check with the office and that. So giving them the tools to very quickly, productively get their job done while still being safe is the challenge that we have to face, and that, companies like ours are out to try to solve. But, Paul, going back to culture is trying to convince the people that, the companies to realize that you don't have to sacrifice safety for productivity. You can merge those two objectives into one and be a safe, productive environment. But it takes thinking about it. It takes constant rework of the processes that you do. It takes rethinking how you do something, as Kevin came up with, and pulling pallets. It's a simple thing, and it's always been done this way. Well, you got to rethink that, and you got to come up with ways that not only allow you to, to be safe, but productive too. And it sounds like in his case, it feels both. I mean, you're more productive when you're not doing things by hand, and you're also safer. So in a lot of cases, these two objectives are really a lot of times the same.
Sure. Moving on, I'd love to get an opinion from the three of you on whether COVID has made a difference to how companies approach warehouse safety and its associated aspects. I mean, maybe starting with you on that, Abby. Do you think it's just as it was before, or do you think there's a different attitude now?
I think it depends which companies you speak to as well, because obviously some companies with regards to logistics have expanded exponentially. So I think in that regard, I can't talk on how that's changed culturally within those companies, because no, I should imagine it's given them a lot more challenges with regards to the additional safety requirements, the cleaning, the spacing, the additional work that they've had to go out. So that's brought a lot of challenges to them. But over and above that, I don't know.
James?
I think COVID is kind of like any crisis that really happens. I think that what I've seen or observed is that a lot of changes were happening slowly, but then when you throw in COVID and the lack of workers, the instability of your workforce, then accelerates some of these things, these changes that were going to happen, because you think about, on top of making sure that people are safe and they're not injured and not able to work, you've also got people who are, out because of health issues, so that are unrelated to work, but at the same time it still affects you. So I think that some of the changes that we've seen just get accelerated in a time like this, because you realize that your safety is the difference between, let's just say you had a staff of 10, and now you've only got 5 consistent people in all the time because of COVID. Well, you need to make sure that 5 doesn't become 4 or 3. So it just puts a bigger focus on those things that we need to do to make people safer. So I think it's a good thing. I think crises like this just accelerate the things that were going on anyway, because it just makes it that much more important. That's my observation so far.
Sorry, Kevin, what were you going to add to that?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, wow, I mean, COVID threw us a curveball, didn't it? It really sort of, I'm not sure how everybody else felt, but at the beginning of COVID, there were new rules being added all the time about, safety around the COVID period, and about how not to get too close to your fellow workers and things like that. I remember in the early days when I was delivering to sites, building sites, they were still having their health and safety meetings in a room, in a compact room, and really somebody had to say, "Hey guys, did you not see the ruling this morning? It's changed. We can't do this."
That's the health part of health and safety, isn't it?
It was an absolute nightmare as to rules changing, governments introducing new legislation, new rules that everybody had to get their head around. And I think it's set us up in a good position today, because today we're ready for not just the cleanliness of the workplace, but also the safety of how the workplace operates. So I think it's all been good. It's been a bit hectic for the last couple of years, but I think we've come out the other side, and we've actually learned a great deal about how to run sites and how to best look after the workforce.
Nice words, Kevin. And I mean, going back to what James said, that safety and it's allied to productivity. It's a complete no-brainer in that sense. So now that we know that, and now that we know that you're doing something that's making workers safer, and you're improving productivity, and you're saving time and all those things, what are the obstacles that prevent customers potentially? Why do they tell you they won't buy your things? Or I'm trying to think what possible reason there could be not to buy them. I mean, if I come to you, Abby, on that first.
I think it depends on the areas that you're looking in. Sometimes it depends who you talk to as well, because sometimes you'll get a manager who, I absolutely want X, Y, Z, and I want this because of this, and it helps with a report, or it helps with functionality. There's something that it helps with. But particularly if people are designing a solution, so we do a lot of workboards, shadow boards, workboards, to help with lockout, tagout, shutdowns, any kind of administration or any work that's being done, permit systems and all this sort of thing. You'll get somebody at the top going, right, okay, this is how I want it. But realistically, you need to get the engagement of everybody. So I find sometimes they get pushback because not price, but it's the fact that, well, this system won't work. We don't want this, we don't want that, we don't want an extra step of administration or something else to complete. If somebody doesn't see that it's going to remove an element, they think it's going to add to, then you get a bit of pushback on that. But when people can see that it's super quick, it's easy, it's simple, it's visual, it's there, you don't need to go and ask somebody, find anything out, then you get the buy-in. So a lot of it is engagement. You find out from the managers or whoever's leading a project particularly, or running the warehouse, this is how I want it to be. And then you engage with the people that are actually doing the work, because sometimes there's not always what they want out of it isn't always the same as what the managers want out of it. And then if you can bash heads and meet in the middle, then you've got a system that you implement that will work, because the people that are using it actually do use it and see the value in using it, because it doesn't add any extra time to their day, and it actually might save them time and make things simpler, make things safer. And then you get the people at the top of the other end that go, actually, right, okay, well, now we've got everybody's buy-in and engagement, and the vision that we had has now come to fruition.
Okay. And James, where might you get pushback?
I was going to mention, as Abby was mentioning some of those things, that, you know, the factors of what we bring to market and bring to businesses, they all make sense, but, and I think a little bit of this might have been accelerated during COVID, but, you know, we find that even though we might bring good ideas, I think especially with COVID, people are so pressed for time that to introduce new ideas and new processes and new changes to what they're doing, they all make sense, but they're limited because they're running over time already, or they're they're making up for lost time. So that's a challenge that I think that we face, is trying to get someone's attention. And I think the challenge is to try to make that as simple, the process as simple as possible, the implementation as simple as possible, so that you're not distracting them from their overwork already, because they are, we find that everyone just seems so pressed for time that we've got to make it, drop this off, it's already implemented, it's ready to go. So the solutions we have to bring have got to be simple.
James, you've just brought up something. I do want to come to you, Kevin, but James just brought up something which I was going to come to, which is about the fear of disruption to existing processes and systems. Can I ask you all to sort of explain how you implement briefly, so in order not to incur disruption at the client's site or addresses? So maybe start with you on that, Jim.
Again, kind of continue with what I had said, is that, our challenge has always been to, how do we do something that makes things simple?
Yeah.
Simple, so that we don't have to have we can get buy-in from someone who makes a purchase, but we don't have to have a lot of installation time or things like that. One of the things that we did with our what we call our collision Sentry product, which is the blind corner warning system, is we looked at a lot of the adjustability of that product. How do you focus sensors? How do you do these things? And honestly boiled that all out, so that we looked at it saying, okay, we're talking about a 90-degree corner. We're looking at, if you install it in this area, that it should be pointed here, it should be focused, and really worked out all of those things, so that when we introduce the product to you, you don't have to have an installation crew go out there and stop and then try to point this device and add or subtract some of the electronics from it and adjust and then go to the next corner and do the same thing. We really, really worked hard on making this a set it and forget it product, because we realize that when we're introducing change or a change of things, we need to make that happen now. Because when people see that you quickly change the process and you, without a whole lot of interruption to what they're doing, they tend to welcome that kind of change, because, oh, you mean I can get this done? I can get it done now? Yes, sure. Put it in there and we're ready to go. When there's a lot of installation time or a lot of processes or meetings to think about how we're going to do this, that tends to gum up the works. And again, I feel like that's our challenge, is to simplify, do what we can for them, so that they can implement safe processes and practices and products as quickly and easily as possible.
Thank you for that. Kevin, yes, I'm presuming that there can't be a huge amount of training time on the SafePul. I mean, maybe there is, but I mean, your implementation time must be just pretty quick, right?
It is, absolutely. And because the action of pulling pallets was already out there, it was just a very sort of simple strapping procedure. My tool just offered that safety aspect of what they were doing. And so I just made sure that in my documentation, it was very clear how to use the tool, and just made sure that everybody, in layman's terms, sometimes it's so easy to put the small legal print in there that just confuses people. So I thought it was very important just to lay it out, how to use it. And it fits in with what they're already currently doing. And one of my mottos in the company was just recognizing what people do. So I didn't get any pushback. I've really been so fortunate with this company, and it's still a family-run, small company. I'm not claiming to be out there in the multi-millions, but I've sold to multi-million-pound companies, and none of them have had that kind of pushback. They've seen how it works, they've seen the videos of how it works, and they've purchased. And so it's quite difficult I do understand out there sometimes there is conformance, and when you're registering a product, that's where you suddenly realize that nobody understands this. I'm having to explain myself over and over again, because it is out there, but this particular tool needs to be explained, and I'm enjoying that. I'm quite enjoying it.
Build it and they will come, Kevin. That's what
Absolutely. I'm really
Abby,
enjoying that.
we were talking about disruption to existing processes when the product is implemented. Is that an issue with Scafftag?
Not really.
I can't think of it being. But
there's a couple of things. One, generally, we're not asking people to do anything more than they already do. It's just a fact that what they are doing is now on the actual asset rather than in a book. If somebody's got somebody that comes in and does PPMs for Lola, for example, they will have to complete the tag or whatever they put on the asset to identify that inspection's being done. The information that they would provide the company electronically or in whatever format would still exist. So no, and sometimes though, I don't like to think of it as disruption, because we will work with people how they already work. So we say, right, okay, well, what are your processes? Because whilst we've got solutions, if they've got a process, which it could be, for example, confined spaces or something along those lines, they've got a way that they work within that area. So it's less disruptive by us working with them to find out how they work and then developing a system to work with them, as opposed to saying, right, okay, well, sorry, we do this square solution and you've got to bend your processes to fit that. So it might take a little bit longer for us to tweak it in the first instance, but from an implementation point of view, it's quite simple.
That's a great place on which I think to draw to a close, because I think we're over time. So just to say to our audience, if you have any questions for our experts, Kevin from SafePul, James Ryan from Sentry Pro, Abby Piper from Scafftag, please do use the facility in the Zoom. Otherwise, write to us at Logistics Business and we'll be delighted to put you in touch with them. But other than that, good luck to the three of you, and thanks for telling us about your great product.
Thank you.
Wish you a great 2022.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.